Hey guys, what's going on? It is Phil, the Harness Doctor. Today is Saturday, January 2nd, 2021. Happy New Year to all of you and Happy New Year to me. Today we are going to be installing this new Silverado High Country cluster into my 2021 Silverado LT. Some of the differences on this cluster you'll notice here is that this one's got a full LED digital display, and we'll show you what the factory one looks like. For the install, you're going to need some bezel removal tools and a 7mm socket. You'll also need a Torx T15 bit to partially remove the radio screen. Now, normally I'd show you the part number for this cluster, but because there are so many variations and compatibility for fitment, I'll leave the link to the website. White Auto and Media Services is where I got this cluster from. It's pre-programmed. It'll be plug and play for my truck. So let's take a look at the inside. We'll look at the factory cluster so I can show you the differences. So this is what the factory LT cluster looks like on my truck. You can see here in the bottom middle, you've got a 4-inch LCD display. The 4 gauges up top are analog gauges. And so on the High Country cluster, this entire center area will be an LCD display. So we'll go ahead and get that swapped out now. This cluster I can currently control using the buttons, the right side buttons on my steering wheel. I can navigate through all the options on the screen. And so once we get this swapped out, you'll see the differences. What I like about the new cluster is that the gauges up top are digital, so we can actually make some customizations there as well. So let's go ahead and get this swap started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lower our steering wheel to give us some space to get to the cluster. Up here at the top, this cluster hood pops off. It's held on by some clips, so I'm going to go ahead and pop that off now. This simply pops off. You can see here it's held on by these 6 clips, so just use your hand and just pop that off, and we'll set that aside. Next, we want to work on removing this cluster trim piece. It is held on by 2 screws here, one 7mm, one on this side. And then this trim is actually going to be installed behind some of these trim pieces. So we're going to have to remove some of these trim pieces here and here to sneak this piece out. So we'll go ahead and get these 2 7mm bolts out now. Next step is we want to remove this trim piece around the radio using a bezel removal tool. Just get it underneath and work your way all the way around. This piece is held on by clips, just like you can see here. We want to take this off so we can get access to the radio screen, because this trim piece is actually held on behind these trim pieces here. So make sure to get that trim piece removed off. Next, we'll remove the 4 Torx T15 bolts here, 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 and here. With the Torx bolts removed, you can now pry the radio off, take your bezel, and just get it up in here and gently pry this off. Just like so. Now, you don't have to remove it completely. You just want it enough so you can get this trim out of the way. Once you have the radio loose, you can take your bezel tool and get it behind this trim piece and actually pop it forward. And once that's popped forward, you'll be able to remove the cluster trim piece away from this side. You'll do the same thing on the driver's side trim piece. You'll take your bezel removal tool, get it behind here and pry this off. You're not going to pull it completely off. There are some screws holding this in here, but you only need to do this enough so that you can remove the trim piece. Now, earlier I showed 2 bolts, but there's actually a 3rd one back here that you have to remove too. So once you have everything loose, you should be able to pop this trim piece off and sneak it outside of these other side pieces that's holding it in. It also helps when you lower the wheel to actually telescope it all the way out so you have room to move this trim piece out. So I've got the trim piece loose, but for some reason in mine, the trim piece has like a rubber cover that's attached to the upper part of the column cover here. So I don't know if I'll be able to remove mine completely, and I don't want to damage anything. So for now, I'm just going to lean this forward and proceed with removing the cluster bolts. You got 2 up here, and then there are 2 down below. There's 1 down here, and then there's 1 back there. So I'm going to use my socket and try to get those 4 bolts and sneak the cluster out. If you have one of these magnetic telescopic tools, it makes it easier to get those bolts out since we can't remove our trim piece. All right, so I've got the cluster partially out. Next step is to remove this connector. This red tab should slide out to the right, and then that should allow us to depress and rotate this lever outward. And here's what that looks like. Once the red TPA is pushed out, you should be able to squeeze down the middle and rotate the lever all the way back, and that should allow you to unplug it, just like so. So I got the cluster in. A couple of things I just wanted to point out. If you're doing this upgrade and you cannot remove the trim piece, just be cognizant of pieces like this that can scratch the lens as you're putting the cluster in. I was putting my hand in front of this while sneaking the cluster in. If you are able to remove this trim piece, great, you won't have to worry about that, but just wanted to point that out. So I've got the cluster in, it's plugged in. We're going to reverse the installation and get everything else buttoned up. So here is that rubber flap I was telling you about that was attached to my cluster trim piece. So if you don't have that and you're able to pull that trim off, I would suggest doing that. And then also remember, for the reverse installation, you have to ensure that the trim piece goes behind your side vents here and on the radio side here before you put everything back together. We'll put all the bolts back on and we'll get it started. So as you can see, the entire center area is a digital display. What's nice is that the 4 analog gauges before are now digital. If you change your mode and go to tow haul, you'll notice the top right battery voltage switches to your transmission temperature as you switch between modes here. And as we toggle through the different menus, you get a larger display with more information available to you. And of course, you can customize all of the information. Now, this cluster was set up for heads-up display, so obviously I don't have that yet. That will be in the works, but that is enabled in the cluster, so I can have that ready to go once we work on that retrofit. But the cluster is completely plug and play once it's programmed. You can see my miles down here below, 476 miles, and I'm very excited about this upgrade. So I'll leave links to everything down below in the description. This is the first mod for 2021 on my 2021 Silverado LT 1500. If you guys like this video, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button and the bell notifications to stay up to date. I've got some mods coming down the pipeline really quick, so be sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the mods. Until next time, guys, this is Phil the Harness Doctor. We'll see you later.